She had built billion-dollar companies without trembling, but on her wedding day, one glance at a tired single dad shattered everything she thought she wanted. The music was flawless, the guests were powerful, and the chandeliers glowed like captured stars. Amelia Rhodes, the youngest female CEO to take her company global, stood at the altar in a white gown that cost more than most houses. Cameras waited, investors smiled, society whispered that this was the wedding of the year. To the world, she was winning at life. Yet her hands were shaking. As the officiant spoke about love and commitment, Amelia's eyes drifted away from the man beside her, handsome, successful, perfect on paper, and landed near the back of the hall. That was when she saw him. Daniel Carter stood quietly near the exit, holding the hand of a small boy in an oversized suit. Daniel was part of the venue's emergency maintenance team, called in early that morning to fix a power issue. He hadn't meant to stay, but his babysitter had canceled, and he couldn't afford to miss the shift. So his 6-year-old son, Noah, stood beside him, sleepy-eyed and clutching a toy car. Daniel looked exhausted. His suit was worn, his shoulders slumped in a way only single parents carried. He wasn't watching the wedding, he was watching his son, gently wiping frosting from Noah's fingers, whispering apologies for having to stay a little longer. Amelia's breath caught, because years ago, in the darkest season of her life, that same man had stood beside her when she had nothing. The memory crashed into her without warning: rain-soaked nights, a broken-down car, a woman crying on a curb after losing her parents in her home in the same month. Daniel had been a stranger then, newly widowed, broke himself, but he had shared his last $20, fixed her car with shaking hands, and said words that had kept her alive: "You don't have to be strong today. Just breathe." She had searched for him for years after her life turned around. And when she finally found him again, he had already pulled away, embarrassed by his struggles, unwilling to be a burden in her successful world. The officiant asked Amelia if she would take her fiancé as her husband. Silence stretched. Her heart was no longer at the altar. It was standing near the exit, beside a man who had taught her what quiet, selfless love looked like. Amelia stepped back, gasps rippled through the hall. Then, without a word, she lifted her dress and walked away from the altar, past shocked guests, past whispered disbelief, until she stood in front of Daniel Carter. Tears streamed down her face as she looked at him and his son. Her voice broke. "Please," she sobbed, "I need you." The room froze. Chapter 2: The Love That Chose Responsibility Over Pride. Chapter 2: Hook. Everyone thought she was chasing romance, but what the CEO did next proved she was choosing something far braver. Daniel didn't move. He looked around, convinced this was some kind of mistake. People like Amelia didn't choose people like him. Not publicly, not at the cost of everything. "Ms. Rhodes," he whispered, trying to step back, "this isn't appropriate." "You're the reason I'm alive," Amelia said, loud enough for the room to hear. "And the reason I know what love really means." She knelt in her wedding dress, right in front of Noah. "Your dad saved me once," she said gently to the boy. "And I never got to say thank you." Noah looked up at her, then at his father. "My dad saves everyone," he said simply. That was when Daniel finally broke. Years of swallowed pride, exhaustion, and loneliness poured out. He confessed how he'd pushed Amelia away because he felt small beside her success. How he believed his broken life would only slow her down. How every night he promised himself his son would never feel abandoned again, even if it meant being alone forever. Amelia stood and turned to the guests. "I was about to marry comfort," she said. Status, approval. But love isn't about who looks right beside you. It's about who shows up when there's nothing to gain. She removed her engagement ring and placed it on the altar. The wedding was over, but something real had just begun. In the weeks that followed, the world exploded with headlines. Her stock dipped, contracts were questioned, friends vanished. But Amelia didn't flinch. She didn't rescue Daniel. She partnered with him. She helped him rebuild confidence, not dependence. She supported his dream of opening a small community repair business. She made room for Noah, attending school events, bedtime stories, scraped knees and quiet victories. Daniel learned to stand tall again, not because of her power, but because she believed in his worth.